The gentle beginning. The evening was quiet, and the golden sun was fading behind the trees. The soft sound of leaves moving in the breeze filled the park. Sandra sat on the old wooden bench, her hands resting gently on her lap. Her eyes looked tired but also full of warmth, as if she carried stories inside her heart that she had never spoken aloud. Keanu sat beside her, not too close, not too far. He was calm, quiet, and thoughtful. His face carried the weight of many silent emotions. He did not speak right away. He only looked at her with patience, waiting for her to open her heart. His silence was not empty. It was filled with respect, filled with kindness, filled with care. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind. Then Sandra whispered the first gentle words. Her voice was soft, trembling, but steady enough to carry meaning. She said she often felt invisible, as if people only saw the surface and never the soul within. She spoke about how the world seemed too fast, too loud, too heavy for a heart that only wanted kindness. The hook was there in her honesty. Those words pulled Keanu in, and anyone listening could feel the same pull. Every viewer watching would lean closer, waiting for what would come next. Keanu listened, his head slightly tilted, his eyes steady. He did not interrupt. He did not rush her. His silence was his way of telling her she was safe. And in that silence, something powerful grew. Sandra continued. She said she had been judged many times for being too soft, too gentle, too forgiving. People told her the world needed strength, not softness. They told her to harden, to be louder, to fight back with the same fire others carried. But in her heart, she believed there was another way. She believed gentle words could heal where anger could only wound. Her confession created tension. Would Keanu agree, or would he see her as weak too? The audience would not know yet, and that question would hold them in suspense. Keanu finally moved. He lowered his gaze for a second as if thinking deeply. Then he lifted his eyes back to her. His reaction was simple, yet filled with something powerful. He whispered back, his voice calm and deep. He told her that her gentle words were not weakness. He said they carried a strength the world often forgot to honor. This moment was the first twist. Instead of dismissing her feelings, he lifted them up. His reaction melted the silence between them. But then Sandra shook her head. She revealed something she had never told anyone. She said her kindness had once cost her everything. She spoke about a time when someone she trusted broke her heart, used her goodness, and left her broken. She said she promised herself never to be that open again. The viewers could feel the pain in her words. The conflict grew deeper. Should she stay gentle in a world that had already wounded her? Or should she become someone else to protect herself? Keanu listened again, his eyes now shining with emotion. The camera in the minds of the audience would linger on his face, showing the way his reaction grew heavier with every word. Then came the surprise. Sandra pulled out an old letter from her pocket. She said it was written by the very person who had hurt her. She had carried it for years, never opening it, never throwing it away. Tonight, she said. She wanted to read it out loud for the first time. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her voice shook as she began. The letter spoke of regret, of mistakes, of pain. It was written in broken sentences, like someone desperate to be heard. And as she read, tears began to roll down her cheeks. Keanu did not look away. He stayed with her through every word. His silence was heavy, powerful, and filled with emotion. The audience would feel the suspense now. What would Keanu say when she finished? What would he do? As the last line of the letter was read, Sandra folded the paper back with shaking hands. She whispered that she did not know whether to forgive or forget. Her voice cracked with the weight of years she had carried alone. Keanu leaned closer. His eyes were soft, yet filled with strength. He spoke the words that would melt every heart listening. He said, sometimes forgiveness is not about the other person. Sometimes it is about freeing yourself from the chains they left behind. The depth of his words echoed. Sandra lowered her head, and the screen in the mind of every viewer would hold on to that silence. But the story was far from over. This was only the beginning of their journey. A journey where gentle words and strong hearts would meet again and again, tested by pain, tested by doubt, and lifted by moments of pure kindness. The weight of silence. The park was quiet, but inside both their hearts, a storm was moving. Sandra still held the folded letter in her hand. Her Her fingers pressed against the paper as if it carried fire, as if letting it go would burn her skin. Her eyes stared at the ground, but her mind was somewhere else, lost in memories of the past. Keanu did not rush to speak. He understood the value of silence. Sometimes silence holds more power than words. Sometimes silence allows the heart to breathe before it breaks. His gaze remained steady, his posture calm, and yet everything in him was listening. After a long pause, Sandra took a shaky breath. Her voice was quiet, almost like a child confessing something for the first time. She said that the letter was only a piece of the pain she carried. There were other stories, darker ones, that she had never told anyone. She said she feared that if she opened all of them, they would swallow her whole. The hook here was sharp. The audience would lean closer, knowing something powerful was about to be revealed. Keanu finally spoke. His voice was low and steady. He told her that pain loses its power when it is shared. He said the things we lock inside are the things that chain us down. He reminded her she was not alone now. His eyes met hers, and in that simple act he offered her a safe place to speak. Sandra's lips trembled. Her body leaned slightly forward as if her secrets were too heavy to hold back any longer. She said that long ago she had trusted someone deeply. She gave them her time, her care, her soul. But that person used her kindness like a weapon. They lied. They broke promises. They left scars not on her body but on her heart. Her words grew heavier. She explained that every time she tried to move forward, she heard those cruel voices from the past telling her she was too soft, too weak, too naive. She said that even now, when she tried to speak gently, part of her feared that people were only laughing behind her back. The conflict deepened. Should she trust again? Should she stay the same soft soul she always was? Or should she become cold and guarded to survive? The viewers would feel the weight of this question pressing inside their own hearts. Keanu listened carefully. He did not deny her pain, and he did not try to fix it with quick answers. Instead, he told her something surprising. He said he too had known betrayal. He spoke softly, revealing a part of himself he rarely shared. He said that once, someone he trusted walked away when he needed them most. It left him broken, and for a long time he believed kindness had no place in this world. This twist drew the audience closer. Now it was not just Sandra carrying the burden. Keanu too had wounds hidden beneath his calm surface. The two of them sat there, sharing the same silence. Two souls carrying different scars but feeling the same ache. Then Sandra whispered something unexpected. She said sometimes she wondered if kindness was a curse. She asked him if people like them were meant to suffer, meant to give and give until there was nothing left. Her question carried suspense. How would Keanu answer? Would he confirm her fear or would he challenge it? Keanu turned to face her fully. His eyes were clear, steady, unshaken. He said that kindness is not a curse, but it is not easy either. He explained that kindness is a choice, and choices always come with a price. He said the world might take advantage, but the truth is gentle hearts can endure storms that hardened hearts cannot. His words had a deep emotional beat. They echoed like a soft but powerful song. Sandra blinked, and tears gathered in her eyes again. She said she wanted to believe him, but she was afraid. She said fear was louder than hope inside her, and then came the surprising moment. Keanu reached out, not to take the letter, not to touch her, but to place his hand gently on the bench between them. It was a silent gesture, an open invitation. He was showing her that he was there, close enough to lean on if she chose, but never forcing her to. That gesture melted the moment. It was respect, humility, and kindness all in one. Sandra looked at his hand, then back into his eyes. She whispered that she wanted to trust again, but did not know how. Keanu answered with patience. He said trust is not built in one night. It is built in steps, in moments, in the way someone chooses to stay when it is easier to leave. The night was beginning to fall, and the golden light was turning into soft shades of orange and blue. The park grew quieter, but their words made the silence alive. And just when it seemed calm, another twist arrived. Sandra revealed that the person who hurt her was not gone. She said they had reached out recently, trying to step back into her life. She admitted she was terrified of what might happen if she let them close again. The audience would feel their hearts racing now. What would Keanu say? Would he tell her to forgive, To push them away or something else entirely? Keanu's face grew serious. His eyes narrowed slightly as if weighing every word carefully. He told her that not everyone deserves a second chance, but everyone deserves the chance to heal. He said the choice was hers, but whatever she chose, she must protect her heart first. Sandra listened, her hands still trembling. She said she had never heard anyone put it that way before. Her voice softened, and for the first time that night, a small light of hope flickered in her expression. The audience could feel it too. This was more than a conversation. It was the beginning of healing, the start of a journey where pain and kindness would keep colliding, but where hope might finally find space to grow. The shadow of the past, the park grew darker as the last traces of daylight slipped away. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint smell of damp grass and distant smoke from small houses nearby. Sandra sat quietly, the letter still in her hand, her eyes fixed on the ground as if the dirt itself carried the answer she was afraid to ask. Keanu sat beside her, steady as stone, his silence warm instead of cold. Sandra finally spoke again, her voice lower than before. She said that sometimes she felt haunted, not only by memories of what had been done to her, but by the fear that she would never escape it. She confessed that even on good days when she laughed and smiled, there was always a small voice in her mind whispering that the happiness would not last. She said the wounds had shaped her so deeply that she did not know who she was without them. This hook grabbed hold of the audience. It was raw, honest, and painful, and it made them lean closer to see if hope could still survive inside such heavy shadows. Keanu shifted slightly, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. He looked at her with a gaze that carried understanding rather than pity. He told her that pain leaves marks, but those marks do not have to define who you are. He said scars are proof of survival, not signs of weakness. Sandra looked at him, her eyes glassy with tears, and asked him if he truly believed that. His answer came without hesitation. Yes, he believed it, because he had lived it. His voice lowered, his words carrying weight. He shared a piece of his past he had never shared before. He told her that years ago, someone he trusted deeply betrayed him in a way that shook his faith in people. For a long time, he carried bitterness like a shield. He thought it would protect him, but instead it poisoned his joy. He said he woke every day feeling strong on the outside but broken on the inside. The audience could feel the twist. Keanu was not simply listening. He was opening his own scars, showing her that even the calmest souls sometimes carry storms. Sandra's face softened as she listened. She whispered that she never imagined someone like him could know that kind of pain. She said, "People always seem to see him as unshakable, steady, untouchable." Keanu gave a faint smile. He said people see only what they want to see. The truth, he explained, is that everyone has battles invisible to the eye. Some battles are loud, but others are quiet and hidden. He told her that the bravest thing anyone can do is admit they are hurting and still choose to keep moving forward. The emotional depth here was powerful. The audience could feel the connection growing between them, built not on empty words, but on the courage of shared vulnerability. But then Sandra revealed something that twisted the moment further. She said the person who had hurt her, the one who had written the letter, was not only trying to come back into her life, they had also found ways to reach the people around her. She said she worried that if she ignored them, they would spread lies, trying to destroy the fragile peace she had built. Her voice shook as she explained that she did not know what to do. She said if she forgave, she feared being broken again. If she ignored them, she feared being painted as cold. And if she fought back, she feared losing herself completely. The conflict became sharper now, gripping the audience with suspense. What would she choose? And what would Keanu say? Keanu's eyes darkened slightly as he thought. He told her that some people will always try to rewrite the story to cover their guilt. He said the danger is not in their lies, but in how much power you give them. He told her that her truth, her kindness, her resilience were stronger than the poison of their words. Sandra lowered her gaze, whispering that she wished she could believe that. She said she often felt like her voice was too small, too quiet, drowned out by louder voices that seemed to control everything. Keanu leaned closer, his voice steady, firm, but still gentle. He told her that gentle voices can carry farther than shouts if they come from a place of truth. He reminded her that the strongest rivers are not the ones that roar, but the ones that keep flowing no matter what blocks their path. His words hit deeply, not only for Sandra, but for anyone listening. It was a moment of humility, resilience, and hope, wrapped in simple truth. Sandra's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not only tears of pain. They carried a glimmer of something else, something softer, lighter, almost like trust. She whispered that maybe she wanted to try, but she was afraid to stand alone. And then came the twist. Keanu told her she was not alone. He promised that no matter how heavy her past was, he would not walk away. He said he could not erase her pain, but he could walk beside her through it. This was the beat that melted hearts. His words were not grand or dramatic, but steady, humble, and real. Sandra covered her face with her hands, her body trembling with quiet sobs. She said she had carried her burdens for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone stay. The night grew darker, the stars beginning to scatter across the sky, and yet their presence on the bench glowed with a different kind of light. The audience would feel it deeply. This was no ordinary conversation. It was the start of a bond built on honesty, respect, and shared pain. But the story was far from over. Sandra's past was still knocking on her door, and the next choice she made could either free her or break her again. The call from yesterday, the night had fully taken over the park. The golden glow of sunset was gone, replaced by the soft shimmer of moonlight scattered across the ground. Sandra leaned back against the bench, her hands still clutching the folded letter, her chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. Keanu sat steady beside her, his quiet presence as grounding as the earth beneath their feet. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was not empty. It was heavy, almost alive, carrying the weight of the past and the uncertainty of tomorrow. Every viewer watching would feel that silence pressing, wondering what would break it first. Sandra finally lifted her head. Her eyes, red and swollen from tears, caught the faint silver of moonlight. She whispered that earlier that very day. Before she came to the park, her phone had rung. She had seen the name on the screen. The name she feared. The name she never wanted to face again. Her voice cracked as she explained how her hands had trembled so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She did not answer, but the sound of that call echoed in her mind. She said she had run to the park because she didn't know what else to do, and she was afraid that if she went home, the phone would ring again. This revelation pulled the audience deeper. The danger was no longer in the past alone. It was alive in the present, chasing her even now. Keanu's brow furrowed, his eyes filled with concern, but his tone stayed calm. He asked her if she wanted to talk about it, if she wanted to let the words spill out before they became poison inside her. Sandra swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she continued. She said the person who called her was not only someone who broke her trust, they were someone who once had power over her life. She had given them her secrets, her hopes, her trust, and in return, they left her in ruins. She said she feared that if she answered again, she might fall back into the trap she had barely escaped. The hook here tightened around the audience's heart. They would wonder, would she pick up the call next time? Would she resist? Or would she be pulled back into the storm? Keanu leaned forward, resting his hands together. His voice was low but steady, filled with a quiet strength. He told her that fear is powerful, but fear loses its control the moment you speak it aloud. He said by sharing it, she had already weakened its grip. Sandra blinked, tears sliding down her cheeks. She said she wished it were that simple. She admitted she still replayed old conversations in her mind, wondering if maybe she was at fault, if maybe she had been too gentle, too forgiving, too blind. The conflict deepened. The audience would feel the tension between her desire to move forward and the heavy pull of guilt dragging her back. Keanu did not look away. He told her firmly that guilt often belongs to the one who causes harm, not the one who receives it. He said, "People like her, people who love deeply and forgive easily, often carry weight that was never theirs to begin with." His words hit like a quiet thunder. Sandra lowered her head, whispering that she had never heard anyone put it that way. She said, Maybe that was why she had always felt so tired, as if she had been carrying a burden that was not even hers. The moment shifted with emotional depth. The audience could feel her exhaustion, her longing for freedom, and the flicker of hope Keanu's words were beginning to plant inside her. But then came a new twist. Sandra confessed that she had written letters back to the one who hurt her. She never sent them, but she wrote them late at night, pouring out her anger, her sorrow, her questions. She said sometimes she wondered if those unsent letters had kept her alive, because they held the words she could never say out loud. Keanu's eyes softened. He told her that those letters were not weakness, they were strength. He said she had created a voice for herself when no one else was listening, and that was proof she had always been stronger than she thought. The audience would feel the beat of this truth. It was not just about surviving, it was about reclaiming her voice. Sandra looked at him, her lips trembling. She asked him if he thought she should read those letters out loud, if speaking them might free her, or if it would only open old wounds. Keanu paused. His gaze drifted to the dark trees around them, then back to her. He said sometimes healing requires reopening the wound, but only if you are ready to pour medicine into it afterward. He told her that if she chose to read them, he would sit beside her, silent but unshaken, until the very last word. The promise in his voice wrapped around her like a blanket. Her eyes filled again, but this time they carried more than fear. They carried trust. The suspense lingered. Would she choose to open those letters? Would she let her voice break the silence that had haunted her for years? The night deepened, the park almost empty now, but their bench seemed like the center of the world. Sandra unfolded her fingers slowly, placing the old letter on her lap. She whispered that maybe she was ready to speak, but she was afraid of what would come out once the words began. Keanu leaned closer, his tone steady, unmovable. He told her that sometimes the words we fear most are the very words that set us free. The audience would feel their hearts racing, knowing that something powerful was about to happen. That part 5 would hold an emotional storm waiting to break. The voice of hidden letters, the park was nearly empty now. The distant laughter of children had faded, and even the sound of passing cars had grown faint. The world seemed to pause, leaving only the two of them in the glow of the moonlight. Sandra sat still, her hands shaking as she held the folded letter on her lap. Her breaths came uneven, like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, afraid of the fall, yet unable to step back. Keanu stayed close, his body calm, his eyes steady, his silence giving her the strength she did not know she needed. For a long while, she said nothing. Her fingers moved across the old paper as if feeling the roughness of the ink could somehow tell her whether to open it or not. Finally, her lips parted, her voice trembling but determined. She whispered that she had written many letters over the years, each one filled with pieces of her heart that she could not say aloud. She said those letters were her secret voice, the only way she had survived nights of doubt and mornings of fear. The audience would feel the suspense rise. Would she read them now? Would she share the words she had buried so deeply? Sandra slowly unfolded the first paper, the creases worn from years of hiding. Her hands shook so much that the paper rattled softly in the quiet air. She began to read, her voice fragile but clear enough to carry the weight of her pain. She read about betrayal, about how she had begged for honesty but received lies. She read about nights she cried herself to sleep, whispering prayers that were never answered. She read about the anger she swallowed, the dreams she buried, the silence she carried like chains around her chest. The words fell heavy, but Keanu did not flinch. He watched her with eyes that carried no judgment, only respect. Every viewer watching would feel that presence too, the way his quiet attention gave her space to be fully seen for the first time in years. Sandra's voice cracked as she moved to the next letter. This one was different. This one spoke of hope, of longing, of the small light that refused to die even in the darkest nights. She wrote about how she wanted to believe in love again, but fear always stood in the way. She wrote about how kindness felt like a weakness, yet something inside her still longed to live with it. Her tears stained the paper as she read, her body trembling as if each word pulled her back to the nights she had written them. Keanu leaned slightly forward, not to stop her, not to take the paper, but to remind her with his presence that she was not reliving it alone. The emotional beat struck deep here. The audience would feel the rawness of her words, the courage it took to speak them, and the silent strength in Keanu's steady presence. When she finished the last line, her hands dropped to her lap. The letter slid slightly, almost falling, but she caught it just in time. Her shoulders shook as sobs broke free, years of silence finally cracking open. She buried her face in her hands, whispering that she felt weak, broken, ashamed for letting herself relive the pain. Keanu's voice broke the silence, low and calm. He told her that what she had done was not weakness. It was the deepest form of strength. He said, facing the pain head-on, speaking it aloud, "Takes more courage than hiding it ever could." Sandra lifted her head slowly, her eyes swollen and wet. She asked him if he truly believed she could heal, if someone like her, shattered and scarred, could ever be whole again. The hook tightened. The audience would hold their breath, waiting for his answer. Keanu looked into her eyes with steady certainty. He said wholeness does not mean erasing the scars. He said, wholeness is learning to live with them, letting them remind you not of what broke you, but of what you survived. He told her she was already more whole than she realized, because even after all the pain, her gentle words still carried love instead of hate. His reaction melted the air between them. It was not grand or loud, but it was powerful, filled with a truth that every viewer could feel deep in their own hearts. But then came the twist. Sandra whispered that reading the letters had freed something inside her, but it had also awakened a fear. She said she was terrified that the person from her past would not stop until they forced their way back into her life. She said she feared losing the fragile strength she had just found. The suspense rose again. Would she face them? Would she hide? What would Keanu say? Keanu leaned closer, his voice firmer now. He told her that the fear was real, but fear is only a shadow. He said a shadow cannot hurt you unless you run from it. If you stand still, if you face it, the shadow fades. He told her that she did not have to face it alone. The audience would feel their hearts tighten. It was a promise, a vow spoken in a way that carried both tenderness and unshakable resolve. Sandra wiped her tears, her breathing slowing. She whispered that maybe she was ready. Maybe for the first time, she wanted to stop running. She said she didn't know how, but she wanted to try. Keanu's lips curved into the faintest smile. He said trying was the first step, and sometimes the smallest step is the one that changes everything. The night air grew colder, but the warmth between them grew stronger. The old letters lay folded on her lap, but their words no longer belonged to silence alone. They had been spoken, carried into the world, and that act itself had shifted something inside her. The audience would feel it clearly. The story was moving into a new phase. The past had been spoken, the wounds revealed, but the test of the present was still waiting, and it would demand more strength than either of them had yet shown. The storm at the door, the night air grew colder and the park grew quieter still. The letters lay folded in Sandra's lap, their words no longer trapped in silence but alive in the open air. She breathed heavily, her chest rising and falling as if each inhale carried the weight of years. Keanu sat steady beside her, his presence like a steady flame in the darkness. But peace, fragile as it was, did not last. Sandra's phone buzzed again inside her pocket. The sound broke the silence like thunder. She froze, her hand hovering near the fabric as if touching the phone would set fire to her skin. She whispered that she knew who it was. The same person. The same voice from her past trying once more to step into her present. The suspense sharpened, gripping the audience. Would she answer? Would she run? Or would she face the storm? Keanu noticed the fear in her trembling fingers. His eyes held hers, calm but firm. He told her she did not have to answer, not tonight, not until she was ready. He said the call was not stronger than her will, and her silence could be her power if she chose it. But Sandra shook her head. Her lips trembled as she said she was tired of running. She said she had carried the weight of silence too long, and if she kept avoiding, she feared she would lose herself again. She whispered that maybe tonight was the night to face the storm. No matter how much it shook her, the audience would feel their breath catch. This was not just suspense, it was a turning point, a moment where everything could change. Her hand finally reached into her pocket. She pulled out the phone, her screen glowing faintly in the dark. The name on the screen was one she could never forget. Her body trembled as she stared at it, her thumb hovering over the green button. Keanu's voice came, low but steady, grounding her. He said she did not have to face it alone. He told her he would sit there, silent but unshaken, no matter what words came through that phone. Sandra nodded, her tears welling again. But this time they were not only tears of fear, they carried a trace of courage. With one final shaky breath, she pressed the button and lifted the phone to her ear. The voice on the other end came sharp, almost desperate. It began with false sweetness, then quickly turned into demands, excuses, and twisted apologies. The person spoke as if time had not passed, as if their betrayal could be washed away with words. Sandra's lips quivered as she listened. For years, these words had controlled her, broken her, chained her. But tonight was different. Tonight she was not alone. Keanu's steady eyes reminded her of that truth. Her voice shook at first, but then grew stronger. She told the caller that their words no longer owned her. She said the pain they caused had left scars, but those scars no longer gave them power. She told them that forgiveness was no longer about giving them a place back in her life. It was about freeing herself from their chains. The audience would feel the twist, the sudden rise of her voice, the strength breaking through the cracks of her fear. The caller grew angry, shouting, accusing, trying to drag her back into the cage she had once lived in. But this time, Sandra did not fall. She repeated her words firmly, tears running down her face, but her tone unbroken. She told them she was done. She told them she was free. And then, with shaking hands, she pressed the red button and ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra's phone slid from her fingers onto the bench. Her shoulders shook as sobs broke free. Not only from pain, but from the release of something she had carried for years. Keanu leaned closer, his voice soft but steady. He told her she had just done one of the hardest things a person can do, face their past and refuse to let it define their future. Sandra cried harder, her hands covering her face. She whispered that she felt weak, broken, as if she might collapse. But Keanu shook his head gently. He said what she had just done was strength in its purest form. He said strength is not about standing without shaking. It is about standing even while shaking. The emotional beat struck deep here, wrapping around the audience's hearts. Slowly, Sandra lowered her hands. Her face was wet with tears, but there was something new in her expression, a lightness, a breath of freedom, a space where the chains had been broken. She whispered that for the first time in years, she felt like her own voice had finally been heard. Keanu gave her a faint, steady smile. He said her gentle words had become her strength, not her weakness. And in that moment, the truth sank into her heart. But then another twist came. Sandra whispered that the call might not be the end. She feared they might try again, through messages, through people, through shadows of the past. Her voice shook as she asked what if the storm was not finished. Keanu's eyes grew serious. He told her storms always come back, but what mattered was not the storm itself. It was who you became after facing it. He said she was no longer the same woman who once carried silence like chains. She was stronger now, and the next storm would not break her the same way. His words were steady, powerful, and true. The audience could feel the strength of resilience echoing in them. The night grew colder, but Sandra leaned back against the bench, her shoulders lighter, her breath slower. The storm at the door had knocked, but she had answered, not with surrender, but with strength. The story had shifted. The past was no longer chasing her the same way. Now she was walking forward, scarred but unbroken, afraid but free. The light after the storm. The park was almost silent now. The kind of silence that felt alive, filled with meaning rather than emptiness. The moon hung high, and the stars spread across the dark sky like scattered diamonds. Sandra sat still on the bench, her eyes swollen from tears, but there was a calmness in her breathing that had not been there before. Keanu sat beside her, steady, present, unshaken. Together they looked like two travelers who had crossed a storm and were now resting in the quiet after. Sandra whispered softly, her voice low and tender. She said she never imagined she could face that call. Never thought she could let her voice rise above the fear that had chained her for years. She admitted she was terrified, trembling, unsure, but still she did it. She said for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had chosen herself. The audience would feel this hook, the sense of triumph wrapped in fragility, the victory born not from strength alone, but from courage that trembles yet refuses to fall. Keanu turned slightly toward her, his gaze warm, his words steady. He told her that courage is not the absence of fear. It is walking forward even while afraid. He said what she did tonight was proof that her gentle words carried power, more power than the harsh voices that had tried to break her. Sandra looked at him, her lips trembling. She said she was grateful for his presence, for the way he listened without judgment, for the way he stayed. She confessed that if she had been alone tonight, she might have chosen silence again. Keanu's expression softened. He told her that sometimes the strongest thing we can do for someone is not to speak, but to stay. He said her voice had always been strong. She only needed someone to remind her that it mattered. The emotional beat struck deeply here. The viewers would feel their hearts swell with the quiet truth in his words. Sandra leaned back against the bench, looking up at the sky. She whispered that the stars looked brighter tonight. Then she laughed softly, almost surprised at the sound of her own laughter. She said it felt strange to laugh after so much crying, but also healing, like her body was remembering something it had forgotten. Keanu gave a faint smile. He said sometimes laughter comes right after tears because the heart is finally breathing again. He told her she had given herself permission to live lighter, and that was why the stars looked different. A moment of peace settled. But then Sandra's voice turned more serious. She said she knew this was not the end. She knew the person from her past might try again, might knock on her door, might send more words designed to break her. She admitted she still feared those moments, still wondered if she would have the strength to keep standing. The conflict deepened one last time. The audience would lean in, waiting for the answer that could carry her forward. Keanu's gaze held hers, unwavering. He told her the storms might return, but storms always pass. He reminded her that she was no longer the same woman she once was. She had faced the voice, spoken her truth, and reclaimed her freedom. He said strength is not about never falling again. It is about rising every time you do. His words were steady, grounded like stones placed carefully on a fragile path. Sandra breathed in deeply, her shoulders lifting as if a weight was sliding off her. She whispered that maybe she had always been waiting for someone to tell her it was enough. That she was enough. She said tonight. She finally believed it. Keanu nodded slowly, his eyes soft but filled with certainty. He said she was more than enough. He said her scars were not signs of weakness, but proof that her heart had survived fire and still chose to love. Her tears fell again, but this time they were gentle, not heavy. She said she never wanted to lose that gentleness again. She promised herself aloud that she would not let the world harden her, no matter how loud or cruel it became. The twist came softly here. Instead of fear owning her, she claimed her own vow, her own truth, and in that moment, she became not only the survivor of her story, but the author of her future. The night stretched on, but it no longer felt heavy. The air felt lighter, the darkness less frightening. Sandra leaned slightly toward Keanu, her voice calm. She said she was ready to go home now, not because the fear was gone, but because she finally had the strength to face it. Keanu stood with her, his presence steady as ever. He said walking into tomorrow would not erase the past, but it would no longer chain her. He told her her journey had just begun, and she would walk it with more strength than she ever imagined. They left the bench together, side by side, their steps slow but firm. The park behind them faded into silence, but the echo of their words remained, powerful and unshakable. And for the audience, the final emotional beat was clear. It was not just a story about pain or betrayal. It was about resilience, kindness, humility, and the strength of gentle words. It was about the truth that even the softest voice can rise above storms, and even broken hearts can find the courage to love again.